Happy Halloween, everybody. So hopefully you had a good weekend and the weather's treating you okay. We'll jump right in here. So this last week's 5-minute moneymaker was talking about something that a tool that we have, and I want to make sure that you know that we have it. So it's a little ebook that we have, and it's called What is It That You Want from Your Portfolio? It's a terrific 14-page book that you could print and give to people with your business card stapled to it. It walks them through why all the other ways to get income are faulty and why the sale plan is the best way that works. Now, who's the only people that can give them a sale plan? They go to their guy and say they want a sale plan. Can their guy give it to them? Yeah, Charles, no, they can't. Right, Nick, Tom, yeah, exactly. So make sure go ahead and download that book. Take a look at it. It's Jeff wrote it, and he did a great job on it. So it gives them a lot of information, gives them walks through all the different things that other advisors are talking about for income and why those things don't work, and then it gives them the option of the sale and why it does work. So take a quick look at that and make sure you know that you can use that as a tool. So there is a lot of science, believe it or not, there is a ton of science about how to get bigger tips, when you're a waitress. So, and actually it's a great place to experiment because restaurants have large numbers of people. They have how many opportunities for choice are there at restaurants? Which table do you want? What do you want to drink? All the different things on the menu. And an army of people willing to deploy different strategies because they want a bigger tip. So, waiters and waitresses are more than happy to experiment to find different things. And they found that through working with thousands of people, they found that there are things that absolutely do work. Now, here, the biggest thing that works, something that will give them a 70% increase in their tips, is something that we do all the time. Repeat after me. When they parrot back, not paraphrase, but parrot back the exact order that people give. So if somebody gives an order that I want this, that, and the other thing, if they say, so, okay, I got it. You want this, that, and the other thing. If they parrot it back, their tip goes up by 70%. Now, where do we use that, guys? Where do we use that particular technique? GOTS, right, Nick? Yeah, GOTS. So what they think is happening here is, and a little bit of this, guys, I'm going to be reading off. I've got a ton of research in front of me, so I could not memorize it for today's coaching call. So a little bit of this, I'm going to just read off some of the reports. So they said, repeating back the customer's order increased the tip size by almost 70% as compared to just saying, okay. The researchers believe that exactly matching the words of others creates feelings of liking and strengthens relationships. Repeating back the exact same words spoken to you demonstrate that you understand, and it's a process called paraphrase. And they actually use this, and I talk about this all the time. Parrot phrasing, not paraphrasing. What's the problem with paraphrasing? When we got somebody, if we actually paraphrase what they said and kind of put it into our own words, what's the problem with that? What's the problem with that instead of paraphrasing? Own words not there, Tom. I'd agree with that. Might not understand it. Yeah, Charlie? So I got a lot of good answers here. So here's the problem with that. So if somebody says, yeah, the market's going to go up, and I say, you're right, the market's going to go up, that's parrot phrasing. That's word for word back what they said, right? But if they say, you're right, Stephen, it's not their words. If they say, if they say the market's going to go up, and I say, yeah, the market's going to go up because if you think about it, it's got the wind at the sails. We got this whole tax cut program that just came on. The corporate profits are coming in. So when you say the market's going to go up, I totally agree with you. Now, is that parrot phrasing or paraphrasing? That's paraphrasing. What's the problem with that? Guys, have you ever had answered a question? Have you ever answered a question and then the person goes and answers it a different way, and you think, that's what I said. Are you happy or not happy when you do that? Are you happy or not happy when somebody tries to, quote unquote, improve your answer? So you're not happy. So you don't want to paraphrase, you want to parrot phrase. Say the exact, if you want to use the power of this, say back exactly what they say when you're gotzing. Does that make sense? Another thing they found is that And this is, when you add candy, when they add candy to the bill, there's a way to really put that on steroids. Does anybody know how you put that on steroids? So they went, because when you add candy, the typical tip only went up by 3%, only by 3%. But there's a way to get a 7-fold bigger increase in your tip. So instead of 3%, you get a 21% increase in your tip if you do something. Nick, you're on the right. You're on. Kevin, you got it. Kevin got it. And Nick's approach is right on the edges of it. If you bring another piece afterwards and say, you know what, you've been great customers today. Here's a couple extra for you. When you give them a surprise, candy, it goes from 3% up to 21%. So think of things that you can do. And what do they say? Can anybody? Tom said he lost the audio. Can we get some yays if you can still hear me? Just some Ys if you can still hear me. Okay, good. So Tom's gonna have to fix this problem. So do you see that? So people maybe expect the candy, you get a 3% bump, but when you give them a surprise, so when you give people rewards that they don't expect, that's when they are happy. That's why sending the book. Our book program to people when they don't expect to get a book, or that little, I just showed you that little report that you could send to them when they don't expect that report. When you send them something and they don't expect it, that's when you get a big bump for that. So think of different ways you can use that in your practice. Another thing is if there is an embossed, either with Visa or American Express or whatever, if there's an embossed, well-known logo on the tray or the payment folder, the tip goes up by 25%. So why do you think that happens? What they think what they believe the reason this happens is that it makes people feel like it's more of a valid entity. Because if you just get a tray that's some plastic tray with nothing on it, does that give you confidence or not confidence that the person taking your payment card is doing the right thing with your credit card? Yeah, it's borrowed credibility. That's right, Nick and Tom. It's credibility. So how do we do that? And Jeff, if you can get on here for a second.
Yep, I'm here.
How many guys have you heard in the past complain that, oh my God, I have to print 119 pages for the 21-point checklist?
I hear that a lot.
So why do we print 119? We don't need to do that, do we? Because you could actually do the 21-point checklist in about 3 pages. So why do we print 119 pages, Jeff?
It gives it importance. It makes it feel. It gives it some heft, some real credibility.
Yes, heft. That's the heft. They found psychologically that if you hand somebody a plastic clipboard versus or just a sheet of paper, and then you give them a plastic clipboard, and then you give them a heavier clipboard, and then you give them a stone clipboard, and you give them the exact same piece of paper, what do they think about the piece of paper that's on the stone clipboard? What do you think? That piece of paper on the stone one is more valuable. Exactly right, Charles. That it's more valuable. So there is a reason we want the 21-point checklist to have heft. They found that if you wear red, now this is a weird one because I'm not going to wear a red shirt. I always wore my quote-unquote uniform was black pants, white shirt, and silver tie. But based on this, guess what I would change? So I didn't wear a suit coat. I wore a white shirt with my sleeves rolled up. And Missy, how many days a week did I wear a black shirt, white shirt, black pants, and silver tie?
It was every day. It was every day of the week.
So I had basically a closet full of white shirts, silver ties. But yeah, right, Tom. I probably changed my silver tie into a red tie. So again, there's a lot of science based on color, and they find that color makes people, both men and women, people will give you a higher tip because it makes people feel more warm and attracted to that person. Another thing they found is that if you don't put a dollar sign in front of something, people will spend more. Now, this is a trick question because we actually do this in one of the in the FIA presentation. We do this in the FIA presentation, but it's not about the dollar sign. It's about the percentages. So remember when we go through the losing money, or the how powerful it is not to lose money, and we talk about the percentages. We have the 4 columns, and we talk about if the
Money math.
if you what is it called? Money math, funny math. Thanks,
Funny
Jeff.
math.
Funny math, the funny math portion. We never want to use percentages, because what happens when you start using percentages to people's brains? Even smart people, what happens to people's brains when you start using percentages? They think it's a lot harder than it actually is. So what we use is we say, if the market goes down, if you have $100 and it goes down by half, Jeff, what would you have?
Then you'd have 50.
And then if it doubled, what would you have?
Back up to 100.
Yeah. So if I say, if it goes down by 50%, what do you have? And it goes up by 100%, what do you have? All of a sudden, people start to get all their brains start to short circuit, and you get all sorts of different answers. So we actually will take off the percentage sign on this. But what this tells you is do we want to be emphasizing dollars when we're explaining things, or do you want more general concepts? More general concepts. Yeah, you're right. It's not real money to them, Dave. Exactly. So that's things that can we learn from waitresses and waiters? Are there things here that we can actually borrow and leverage in our practices? Yeah. Now, there's other biases that we can actually utilize as well. And I just finished an article talking about the 26 different psychological barriers. We're not going to go through all 26, but there's lots that we can use. The first is the fear of the unknown. The fear of the unknown. And they call it the ambiguity effect. But basically what they're saying is that people like to do things that are different or don't like to do things that are different. They don't. Yeah, so even, I've talked about this before. The people we want have money, so they're going out to eat when they want, they're driving the cars they want, they're going, going on vacation when they want. So what's the likelihood, how much of their pinky finger are they going to lift for a good idea? Not much, that's right, not much. So they don't want to change. So coming to them with something better, how much of an effect is that going to have? If you come to something with something a lot better than what they have, guess how much effect it has on them? Not much. Because do they have everything they want right now? Yes, and all you're offering to them is more, and they say, I already have that. And the easiest thing for them to do is what? The same thing they're doing now. So how do we deal with that? And I always use this little analogy when people come on board, but a lot of you haven't heard this for a long time, so I'm going to say this. So let's say that I have a 10-year-old pair of pants, and there's a little hole in it, and it's a little bit worn here or there, and a little tiny stain here or there, and you come to me, Mike, take those pants off now. Put on these brand new ones. These are a lot. They're stain free. There's no holes in them. They're warmer in the winter. They're cooler in the summer. Take your pants off. Put these on right now. Look at how much better these pants are. What am I going to tell you 9 times out of 10? Yeah, I'm fine. I'm good. Now you can get me to take your pants very, very easily, but it has nothing to do with your pants. How do you get me to take your pants? Light my pants on fire. If my pants are on fire, do I care how cool your pants are, how clean your pants are, how whether it has holes in it or not? If my pants are on fire, I'm going to whip them off and I'm going to reach for what? The nearest pair of pants. So how do we light people's pants on fire? Well, first of all, did that have anything to do with your pair of pants that you were offering me? No. So yes, Dave, we use the 21-point checklist. And what's the fire? How do we light the fire? What's the fire that they have? Their advisor, that's right. Their advisor is taking advantage of them. Their advisor is disrespecting them. At that point, does it matter what you have to offer? Does that have anything to do? Does that have anything to do with you and your benefits and how how great what you have to offer is. It has nothing to do. That's right, Kevin. They have nothing. They just want to leave their current situation. They're going to reach for the nearest next advisor, and guess who that's going to be? So Jeff, how many times at a 21-point checklist have you heard guys kind of falling into the trap of explaining and how they never do that with a client, and I always make sure that my clients don't have turnover, and I always make sure blah blah blah. They start to talk about how they operate with their current clients. How often do you hear that, especially with somebody who's newer to the system?
Yeah, you hear it a lot. I mean, that's one of the traps that you can kind of fall into.
And why is that, guys? Because before you came in at 21, guess how you tried to get people? You're telling them that that you were a nicer guy, you were more trustworthy, you had better solutions, you had better ideas, you had better tax savings. It's a beauty contest, right, Kevin? The beauty contest. The beauty contest does not work. Does not work. Anchoring. Anchoring means relying too much on the first price or a piece of info provided while making a decision. And so the takeaway from this is first impressions matter. If I walk into a guy's office and or I meet a guy and his shoes look cheap and they all scuffed up, I don't care how brilliant he is. What's the likelihood I'm going to give him all my money? Because does he look successful or not successful? Not successful. And I don't want to give my money to somebody who's not successful. Now, guys, is that fair? In fact, the guy who has cheap shoes that aren't taken care of, he might be a genius. He doesn't care about the worldly things. He's all about, the science of what he's doing. That might be the case, but my fear is what? If he pays that little attention to detail to his shoes, how much attention is he going to pay to my money? If he has shoes that are that cheap and worn out, what's the likelihood he's had any success with other clients? So it's the first impression does matter. So how can we have a great first impression? First of all, make sure you're wearing a decent pair of shoes that are shined. They don't need to be $700 pairs of shoes, but a decent pair of shoes that are shined. Make sure you're wearing a clean shirt. Do we have a system that makes them feel really happy and warm and fuzzy with you immediately when they walk in? Yeah, it's called the WOW system, where you set up it costs about $150 to set up your office to make them feel unbelievably happy with you. It's simple things like going to Sam's Club or Costco and getting a little marquee so that when they walk in it says, "Welcome to Mr. and Mrs. Smith," and having choice of beverages, maybe having fresh baked cookies. I mean, there's all sorts of things that you can do with the WOW that only cost you $150. And that's when they walk in and they have a great first impression, guess how, guys, how many of you have walked into a house and knew immediately that was the house you were going to buy? And this is one of the biggest purchases that you ever make in your life. And you walk into the foyer and you say, "This is it." Does that happen? How often does that happen? It's the biggest, and you talk to realtors, they tell you, they can tell immediately when somebody walks in the house if they're going to buy it or not. And that's not everybody, but a big chunk of people, So make sure you have a good first impression. The backfire effect. What the backfire effect is that it's a cognitive quirk that not only rejects facts that contradict your core beliefs, but strengthen those core beliefs despite the facts, which means the more you try to tell somebody they're wrong, and guess what they'll do? Do they remain negative, or do they get even more negative? They dig in, right, Nick? They dig in. It actually enforces I don't care how great your facts are. Can you prove anything to anybody? No, you can't. So in fact, what they found is the more you try to prove it, and have you ever had an argument with somebody and they become even more, you're completely in the right. You're completely in the right. And you are putting down fact after fact into fact. And it seems like these people are getting crazier and crazier. Have you ever talked to somebody like that? That is the backfire effect. The more you try to prove it, the more they'll lock on to the craziest of beliefs. Does that make sense? So how do we avoid that with the 5Q system? in motivational interviewing. It's not the 21. Nick, we never tell them anything. When you're learning the scripts, how many statements are in the scripts? Guys, I'm argumentative as heck. I have unshakable belief in everything that I believe. Nobody's going to prove me wrong, and I will stand my ground. So guess how well that worked for me when I was in a selling situation? So I was making 50 grand a year for 8 years. So I learned that never, ever, ever make a statement. Only ask questions, because the only person somebody believes 100% of the time is who? There's only one person somebody's going to believe 100% of the time, and who is that person? Themselves. So I learned not to make statements. Only ask questions and let them come to their own conclusions. That's the only way you're going to get somebody to change their mind, is if they change their own mind. The bandwagon effect. Where do we use this? Well, when we're doing the FIA presentation, what do I constantly say? So, why do you think so many people want the Warren Buffett? Why do you think so many people do this then? I don't know if you should do it, but why do you think how many times do I ask that question? Why do you think so many people want this then? How many people do you think do this? I'm doing it because it's the bandwagon effect. If they tell me 30 times that everybody does this, what are they going to want to do? If they tell me 30 times in an hour that everybody wants the FIA, guess what they're going to do? Or the Warren Buffett, they're going to do it. Make sense? So we use that. That's why we do that over and over and over. Rhyme is reason effect. This is the most bizarre thing in the world, but it works. They found that if you use rhymes, whether it's true or not, guess what? Whether it's true or not, guess what? When you start to use rhyming, people will start to believe the little thing, even if it's not true or doesn't make any sense. What's the rhyme here? What's the rhyme from this picture? We all know it. The glove don't fit, you got to acquit. Yep. The glove don't fit, you got to acquit. So I use that all the time. Don't tell, sell, preach, or teach. Tire kicker and plate licker. I use these all the time. How can you use it? Well, some of the things you can do is, I find that the more you know, the more you'll grow. The more you'll grow your assets, the more you'll grow your safety, the more you'll grow your lifestyle, the more you grow your peace of mind. So the more I find, and the way I operate is, the more you know, the more you'll be able to grow in all of these different areas. That's one idea. Or you could use, I found that missing the small things can lead to painful stings. So is this, and then you go, so this turnover might seem like a small thing, but it could end up with a painful what? And then if you use that continually throughout, guess what? Becomes a fact. My belief is it's trust or bust. If we can't set up a relationship where you trust me, then this is, then our relationship is bust, and we might as well not move forward. So these are just ideas of things that you can use. This one is the IKEA effect. What do you think the IKEA effect is? We use this one big time. What's the IKEA effect? Kevin, very good. Nick's got it too. Yes. The IKEA effect is, we love it if we made it. So where do we use that with the 5Q system? Or is the 5Q system really all about the IKEA effect? Can I tell them their guy is screwing them? No. Who's the only person that can tell them their guy is screwing them? Themselves. Think about the IKEA, when we do the FIA presentation, who's building the FIA? Us or them? They are. So this is something that we use, and anytime the more you make it, the more you're hands-on with it, the more you're going to fall in love with it. That's another reason to let them come to their own conclusions. Let them build the case against their guy. Let them build the case for an FIA. Let them build the idea of what they want to do. Because if they do it, guess what? They'll love it. Now, if I build something and I tell them that an FIA is great, or I tell them a guy's screwing them, they may think it's, I made a good case, but are they in love with that case? No. And what do they say at the end? I'm going to shop around. I'm going to shop around. Let me think about it. So there's just so many reasons why we want to spend the time having them, invest the time having them tell us instead of us telling them. The illusory effect, otherwise known as how fake news becomes real or becomes truthful. Something that's completely a big fat lie can become real in people's minds. So the illusion of truth effect. People are more likely to identify as true statements those they have previously heard, even if they cannot consciously remember having heard them, regardless of the actual validity of the statement. In other words, a person is more likely to believe a familiar statement than an unfamiliar one. If you say it enough, it becomes a fact, right, Dave? So if you say it enough, it becomes a fact. And I just got done reading a book called Hit Makers. And one of the things they found out, what would you, if you were to guess, what is the most famous painting, the most worshipped painting in the world? What is that painting? Mona Lisa, you got it, Mona Lisa. Now here's the funny thing. Mona Lisa, until 1920, Mona Lisa was considered a second-rate painting. It was considered a second-rate painting. And then it was stolen. And when it was stolen, guess how much news it got? Huge amounts of news. And it was in all the magazines and all the papers and all the whatever. So when they finally found it, guess what? Because people had seen it so often, guess what happened to the Mona Lisa? Became cherished, and they've done studies on this. What they've done studies on this where they've taken lesser known paintings to like a college class. They've taken lesser known paintings to a college class, and they didn't tell them they were doing this, but they inserted those lesser known paintings without emphasizing them. They just inserted them so the kids saw them more often. They didn't emphasize them. They didn't tell the kids that these are better paintings. They didn't tell them anything, but they inserted it so they saw these lesser known paintings over and over and over without even addressing them, without even, do you get it? They're not telling the kids these are great paintings. They're not even mentioning them, but they had them see those paintings more often during the semester. And then at the end of the semester, they asked them which ones are the most important paintings. And guess what paintings they picked? Picked the ones that would normally be considered the most important paintings, or the ones they saw more often. Yeah, the familiar ones. The familiar ones, exactly right. And they found that, did you know there's actually a formula for writing a hit song? And it said there's actually a formula where you repeat the same things over and over and over in the song, and it's much more likely to be a hit. Because people want a strange note to be hit, or do they want a note that's familiar to them to be hit as they're going through the song? See, there's something called where it needs to be familiar. It needs to be slightly different but familiar. It needs to be slightly different but familiar. Because as human beings, we are wired for the familiar. So when you ask me, Mike, why, for example, with the non-financial things, how many times when we talked about the power of attorney, how many times do I want them to say any advisor doesn't look at a power of attorney is a lousy advisor? How many times do I want to say it? One time? Many times. So I'll come up with different scenarios. So if I didn't cover this, what kind of advisor be? Will you be a bad advisor? Right, because let's say that I got you a 30% rate of return, but you came to me because your husband was incapacitated and you said, hey, I need that money. I said, oh, well, you know what? Can't have access to it. Even though I gave you a 30% rate of return, what would you think about me? Yeah, you're a lousy advisor. What if I said, hey, it's not my fault. Go talk to your advisor. Hey, that's not my problem. It's yours. It's his. What would you say to me? Good or bad? No, you'd be bad. See, I'm making up excuses for them to tell me over and over and over that I'd be a bad advisor. So by the time, if we do that for the power of attorney, for the medical things, for the identity theft, for the umbrella, for the property casualty, if we have them do that 3 or 4 or 5 times, but by the end, they've said it 15, 20 times that I'd be a bad advisor, doesn't cover those things. What is a truth in their mind now? If they've said it 15 times that any advisor doesn't cover these non-financial things are a bad advisor, what's become a truth? They believe it. And if they believe that, Glad, you're right, Glad, if they believe it, then what are they going to assign to their current advisor? Because he didn't cover those things. What are they going to assign to their current advisor? That their current, right, Charles, that their current advisor is a bad advisor. So why do I repeat myself or have them repeat myself? It's because of the illusion of truth effect. The more they say it, the more it's true. Make sense? Once is not enough. Seeing the Mona Lisa one time, did that make it the most famous picture of all time? The most famous painting of all? No. Seeing it what? Gazillions. Yes. Another is the peak and the end rule. And I see this especially with seminars. Guys, I see guys wind up, you know, they stop presenting right here, and then they basically mentally pack up, and their presentation, the last 5 minutes, is basically their energy goes down, the fun stuff that they're talking about goes down, the interest in what they're doing goes down. No, you want to end with the what? We all know it. You want to end with the what? Bang, right. You want to end with the bang. So there's going to be two things they're going to remember from the seminar. Well, essentially there's more than two things, but the big things they're going to remember are the thing that they felt the most. We judge our past experiences almost entirely by how they were at the peak and how they ended. And the peak is emotional peak. Emotional. These are emotional things. People don't remember what the information as much as how they felt when the information was given. If there was a huge laugh here in the presentation, they're going to remember that. If there was a huge, boy, I hate government right here, they're going to remember that. So when you're giving, like with the Social Security, I've over and over and over for the last 8 years, I've looked at people's Social Security presentations. And so Social Security presentations do nothing but facts and figures, information. Guess what their graph looks like? Guess what their graph looks like? Flat. And it's flat down here. Why? People don't remember all that information. What they remember is what? Feelings. People don't remember information. They remember feelings. Does that make sense? So when you're doing a presentation, make sure there's things that get them emotionally involved. And for goodness sake, make sure you end with a bang, okay? This one we know from Kahneman Tversky with behavioral economics that what? Winning $100 feels the same as losing $100, or losing $100 is way more painful than winning $100 is pleasurable. And yet, what do most advisors, other than 5Q trained advisors, what are most advisors chasing? Protecting or finding the a better rate of return? They're chasing return. Don't do that. People, as we said before, can you ever make somebody happy with rates of return? Can you ever make somebody happy with rates of return? No. You can make them excited, but you're not going to make them happy. I mean, if you give them a 30% rate of return, but they're getting a divorce, or they've got a health problem, or they got a child with addiction problems, is that 30% going to make them happy? No, it may get them excited. And you know what? And when you give them a 30% rate of return, guess what they're going to ask you? Well, my buddy, he just got a what? 40, right? So you never can make them happy with rates of return. But can you make them unhappy with rates of return? Can you make them unhappy with rates of return? I don't care if they're healthy and their kids are wonderful and their wife loves them. Can you make them unhappy with rates of return? Yes, because if they've just lost 30% of their net worth, and guys, with people with money, where is most of their net worth? Most people, where's their net worth? In the bank, in real estate, or in the stock market? It's in the market. And so when you lose 30%, I don't care if you're healthy. I don't care if you've got a happy wife or great kids. You're still going to be what? Unhappy that you just lost a third of your net worth. So we've got let's make sure with at least a 50-50, not a 60-40 in guaranteed. Here's one that we fight all the time: status quo bias, avoiding action and avoiding change. We're biased to keep things the way they are, even if we didn't originally choose it. We're biased to avoid risks generated by change. Guys, what is our biggest competition? What's our biggest competition? It's this, the status quo bias, especially for our clients that have money. They want to do nothing. So the only thing is going to get them to do nothing is to do what? Show them a better way to do things, give them a higher rate of return, lower their taxes. What's the only way you're going to get them to do nothing? I mean, to do nothing, to do something, to move. What's the only way you can get them to move? Get them on fire, right, Ben? Get them on fire. Here's another one, bizarreness effect. People remember something that's bizarre. People remember something that's bizarre. So I use this when somebody answers a question wrong. What's the first thing that we do when somebody answers one of our questions wrong? First thing we do? Agree. Yes, gots them. We gots them. We tell them why their answer is correct. So we find some nugget of truth in what they said, and we tell them why their answer is correct. Then am I going to ask the same question over again, or am I going to split it into tinier, easier questions? Simpler, easier questions, right. And then when I do the simpler, easy questions, what's the simplest, easiest, open-ended question we have? An either or. And when I make the or, if I want them to say the either, instead of the or, what am I going to make the or look like? Ridiculous. I'm going to make the or look ridiculous. So if I want to say the market was going to go, let's say we use the same example where I think that I want the market to go, I want them to say the market's going to go down, but they say the market's going to go up. I say, yeah, exactly, the market's going to go up. That's what we hear on the news. You know, and these guys are experts. They've been, you know, they study it. They look at all the information out there. So you nailed it. When the market goes, you know, the market's going to go up. And then I'm going to go into and when we think about it, if anybody could, if I could see the future, how rich would I be? You'd be really rich. If anybody could see the future, how rich would they'd be really rich? So when somebody's telling us the market's going to go up, that's believable. So we should sell our house. We should, take a mortgage on the house. We should take a mortgage on our car. We should borrow as much as we can to the bank and put it in the market. Or we know that them saying the market going up is basically not a real. It's more of a crystal ball prediction than it is a guarantee. So what's the ridiculous there? You go all in. What did I tell them they should do? If they really believe the market was going to go up, what should they do? If you believe the market was going to go up, I'm sorry, not believed. If you knew the market was going to go up, what should you do then, guys? Go all in. So take a mortgage on your house. Take a mortgage on the car. Borrow as much money as you can. Get in there, man. And as soon as you go ridiculous, what will people do? Well, they're not for sure. So we don't really know for sure what's going to happen. So you got to, when I want them to say something different, I'm going to get on their side, find a nugget of truth in what they said, and then I'm going to ask them an either or question, make sure that it's ridiculous, that there's no way they could answer it the wrong way. Another fallacy is the way you feel now is, if you've ever dealt with a child who's got a broken heart, how long do they think that broken heart is going to last? How long do they think that broken heart is going to last? Forever. Life is over, right? So, and that's, what do we face? Well, we're facing it right now where people believe what? The market's been going up for 8 years, so obviously it's going to what? I'm excited. Or the other way we get it is if they've lost money and they feel sad and they feel fear, how long is that fear going to continue? And we should be dealing with that right now. So you need to have your clients' portfolios in a 50-50, 60-40, because if they lose 30, 40%, what are they going to want to do? Pull everything, maybe. They'll either want to do nothing or they'll pull everything. Either way, what's going to happen at that point? Will they make any other change? If they pull everything, guess where they're going to put it? Someplace safe. And are they going to want to make any changes with that, or are they going to want to sit on it? Yeah, cash, and they're going to just sit there and do nothing with it. So you want to make sure to avoid them getting overly positive and overly negative. Do we want people overly positive or overly negative, or we want them even keel? Even keel. And that's where that 50-50, 60-40 gets them into an even keel no matter what happens. The other thing is people love the halo effect. Positive vibes and positive traits make people want to trust you more because they like you more. So what's the one tool that you should be practicing 15 minutes every day that gives them positive vibes about you? Everybody should answer this. Dave's got it right. Millen's got it right. What are you practicing with them at 15 minutes, though? What are you practicing in that? Gots. Getting on their side, not correcting them, laughing at their jokes. These are all things that are, those 15 minutes are going to give you the ability to give them positive vibes about you. And the more positive they feel about you, the more likely they're going to want to work with you. Do not skip those 15-minute drills. MIFT, most important 15 minutes daily. So we call it that. There is nothing you can do that is more important than those 15 minutes because it gives people positive vibes. And how often do we want positive people around us? How often do we want people who make us feel good around us? Constantly. Sunk cost fallacy. Well, I've lost all this money in it. I might as well what? Or I spent all this time doing it. I might as well what? Keep doing it. So one of the ways we run into it is, if you ever had somebody say, well, I just, everything you're making says makes sense, but I just moved my money to this other guy a year ago. Have you ever run into that? Everything you're saying makes sense, but I just moved this other guy for a year ago, so I'd want to give him a chance. I went through all the hassles of just moving the money. So I've been working with this for so long, I don't want to move. So what you want to do is get them to understand that clinging to a mistake, just because you spent a lot of time, don't cling to a mistake just because you spent a lot of time making it. So just because you made a mistake over a long period of time, should you cling to it? Well, the thing is, I've worked with my guy for 15 years. I feel kind of, he's like part of the family. Well, first of all, if you hear him say that, what do you know you didn't do? What do you know you didn't do? Yeah, you did the 21 wrong. You didn't do the advisorectomy. You didn't have them explain to you why their guy was disrespecting them. Instead, you probably did what? You had them get irritated that they're not diversified enough, that they have too much turnover, that they're taking too much risk, that they didn't have these documents done. What word is not mentioned in any of those things I just said? What word is not mentioned in any of those words that I said? Their advisor, right? Their advisor. They got to say, my advisor did this to me on purpose. Foot in the door, you start small and you grow big. Why do we start with the Survivor's Guide? Will anybody ever leave their current advisor because of the Survivor's Guide? No. But that's how we start them thinking, geez, my guy, I thought he walked on water, but you know what? He could do things a little bit better. But by the end, we're having them discover what? This guy is stealing from me. You can't start with there. You got to start small, then grow big. The curse of knowledge. The curse of knowledge. What that's talking about is we know too much, and that hurts us. Why? That hurts us because we think they know things that they don't know, that we think they understand us when they don't. This experiment is really a fun thing to do. If you're ever at a party or whatever, what you want people to do is you want them, for example, to tap out an easy song like Frere Jacques or Happy Birthday or some song that's super easy, and they'll tap it out on the table. And the person who's doing the tapping, he thinks it's how easy to hear that. Super easy, yep. And all the listeners, how many of them are going to get what the guy's tapping? Virtually nobody. Because all they're hearing is a finger tapping on a table. They're not going to hear the melody. They're not going to hear that familiar the notes. So what's happening is the tapper thinks it's simple as pie to hear what he's tapping out. The listener is like, I don't get what he's doing. Even if it's Happy Birthday or Frere Jacques or some easy, super easy song, they won't be able to hear it 9 times out of 10. And so how that works, and well, first of all, how do we avoid the curse of knowledge with our system? How do we avoid the curse of knowledge with our system? How do we always know the listener is getting what we're saying? That's right, because they tell us. We ask open-ended questions, not yes or no's. We ask open-ended questions, and they tell us. They explain to us how things work. They explain to us why their guy's taking advantage of us. They explain to us everything. We don't, but you get, when you're doing all the yapping, when you're telling, selling, preaching, or teaching, you think you're being a genius here, and guess what they're hearing? You tapping on the desk, some woodpecker over there rapping on a tree. We avoid this curse of knowledge, and this is a big problem in our industry, because we do these things all day long, but do our clients do these things all day long with finances? No, and we have a lot of concepts that are not second nature that people need to know. And if you're doing all the talking, if you're telling, selling, preaching, teaching, they're not going to get it. And in the end, they're not going to say, I don't understand what you're saying. They're just going to say, I need to think about it, and then they disappear. That's why we ask open-ended questions, so they are telling us versus us telling them. Recency bias. Why did I buy a four-wheel drive car? Because we hardly got any snow in January. Now, if the average snowfall is 30 inches a month, but they only got 3 inches, what's that mean for down the road? So, and this, again, we see recency bias. For the market has been going up for 8 years, so what do we think? It's going to keep going up. Or if the market's gone down for 3 years, guess what we think? Market's going to keep going down. So it's a difficult thing. So average return for the past 3 years, average return this year, that means, oh my gosh, I'm losing money. I should stop investing. And the other thing is, if the average rate of return is 12 for the last 3 years, and historically it's 7, we know that what? It's going to go down. But no, the funniest thing about this is the last 3 years of the 90s, 97, 98, 99, the market was doing what? The average return was 25%. One of the head of obstetrics, obstetrics? That's what it is. The head of obstetrics at the local hospital was my client. He's the one and only doctor I had. And he called me and said, Mike, your calculations are way off. I should be able to retire in 3 years. You said I wouldn't be able to retire for 15 years. I'll be able to retire in 3 years. I said, Dave, really? 3 years? What? I've obviously missed something. What makes you think you're going to return in 3 years? He says, I'll fax you, because that's what, couldn't scan back then. It was fax. Let me fax you something. Well, he faxed me something, and what did he fax me? What did he think was going to happen over the next 3 years? Yeah, the last 3 years return. He thought he was going to get 25 and 30% rates of return over the next 3 years. Is that what happened in 2000? No. A gambler's fallacy. So let me ask you a question. On a roulette wheel, half the numbers are red and half the numbers are black. Which of the following runs is more likely to end in a red? Which one of these? Number 1, number 2, or number 3? Which one of these, number 1, number 2, or number 3, is most likely to end up with a red? So I'm getting about 2/3 right answers and 1/3 wrong answer. So if you cover up all these, what's the chance of getting red or black? What's the percentage chance of getting red or black? 50-50. Does that change just because there's been this many B's in a row or this many B's in a row? No. So those of you that answered, which of the following runs more likely to get a red? None or all, because there is no more. None of these is more likely or less likely to get red. But our mind tricks us, and we think, what? Well, geez, there's got to change. Our luck has got to change sooner or later. If I hold on long enough, my luck will change. You guys, that is fallacy. That is a wrong way to look at things. So in this case, it's 50-50. But this is just this example. But in real life, what we're saying is that for us thinking that things are going to change, our luck has got to change. Is that true, or is that a fallacy? My luck is going to change. Is that true, or is that a fallacy? It's a fallacy. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. Just because our luck has been going bad doesn't mean it's not going to go continue to go bad. Doesn't mean it's suddenly going to go good. On the other side, if our luck has been really, really good, does that mean necessarily it's going to go bad? No. On the opposite hand of it is the hot hand, where you walk into the casino, you put a quarter into the slot machine, and you win $100. Guess what's just happened to that person? First time they walk into a casino, put a quarter in the slot machine, and they win $100. Guess what just happened to that person? They're now what? Addicted. They're addicted. If you win too many times, and we see this all the time with managers. If they win this many times, guess what we think? Peter Lynch with Magellan Fund. He won all the way through the 90s. Was because he was a genius? Was Peter Lynch a genius? No. He invested in retail stocks. Guess what segment of the market did the best in the 1990s? Retail stocks. Holy cow. Guess what happened to Magellan Fund as soon as retail stocks quit doing well? Tanked. But people assume that Peter Lynch was what? A genius. No, he wasn't a genius. He was all the stocks were in the right segment of the market. That's the only thing that happened. It wasn't anybody who had all their money in retail stock. Guess how they would have performed in the 1990s? Now, if he got out of retail stocks just before everything, then guess what? But he didn't do that. He ran right into the ground. I love this. This is out of Fooled by Randomness by Nassim Taleb, I think. Lucky fools do not bear the slightest suspicion that they may be lucky fools. By definition, they do not know that they belong to such a category. They will act as if they deserve the money, just like Peter Lynch acted like he was a genius. Their strings of successes will inject them with so much serotonin or some familiar substance that they will even fool themselves about their ability to outperform markets. Our hormonal system does not know whether our success depends on randoms. Who's experiencing this right now? Think bonds. Who's experiencing this right now? He was considered a genius forever. In the last 5 years, he has made mistake after mistake after mistake. Think bonds. Bill Gross, exactly, Tom. Bill Gross, PIMCO. He did. So how hard was it to be a genius in bonds when interest rates were going down? Everyone was a genius. And he's been getting killed the last 5 years. But if you talk to Bill Gross, guess what he thinks? He still thinks he's a friggin' genius, and he's not. So my point here is not that Peter Lynch is a dummy, and not that Bill Gross is a dummy. It's just that in fact they are, because brilliant people know what they don't know. Brilliant people know what they don't know. Peter Lynch didn't know what he didn't know. He thought he was a genius. Bill Gross didn't know what he didn't know. He thought he was a genius. So the point here is what? We don't know what's going to happen in the future. And if we don't know what's going to happen in the future, we have to hedge our bets. That's why we go 50-50, 60-40. Make sense? So when you've mastered the crib notes and the motive, when you've done your 15-minute drills, I hope these fallacies, the things I'm showing you, do you see why if you follow the system, we're helping you to overcome all of these fallacies that our clients have, all of these biases that our clients have? That's what the whole system, I know the system sometimes seems like it's a bear and we're asking you to do a lot of things, but we're having you do those things. Why? To overcome all those biases and fallacies that people have. Make sense? Super. Well, you guys have a great Halloween. We'll talk to you all next Monday. Have a great week, guys.